The Katyusha rocket launchers employed by the Soviet Union during the Second World War were an incredibly interesting and effective weapon, so it was only natural then for the Germans to make a decision to create their own version of the weapon system and hit the Soviets back with a taste of their own medicine. The 8 cm Raketen-Vielfachwerfer would make its way onto the battlefield in 1943 and throw hundreds of rockets towards the Allied forces pushing towards Germany. In today's video, we look at the German version of the barrage rocket launcher in World War II. If you enjoy this video and want to see more, hit that subscribe button. It's free and really helps the channel reach more history lovers like you. The Soviets were playing around with the idea of rocket artillery even before the Second World War started. The eventual design used during the war featured a simple metal rack system of parallel rails. The rockets, which for the Soviets had differing sizes depending on what variant of the system was being used, would be mounted onto these racks. The rockets had fins attached to aid in stability whilst moving through the air. Once fired, each of the rockets were being projected forwards along the rack in the direction they were being aimed, and then fly through the sky towards the intended target. The Katyushas were mounted on anything the Soviets could find, mostly trucks and tractors. A battery of trucks would move into position, and with each having anywhere from 14 to 48 rockets, you can imagine the huge saturation bombardment that followed. After this, the trucks would move off into a new position to avoid counter-battery fire from the Germans. The main issues with the Katyusha launchers were the lack of accuracy and the time to reload. The rockets themselves, although fairly stable in the air, couldn't be aimed as accurately compared to conventional artillery of the day. Further, it took up to 50 minutes in some cases to load all of the rockets, which obviously in that time frame, a normal artillery piece could fire a significant amount of rounds. But nonetheless, the Germans progressed with their intention to make a copy. The Nebelwerfers were already in existence at that point, but unlike the Katyusha-style rockets, these were finless and usually in an arrangement featuring a lot less projectiles. The thought process therefore being, if a rack system could be used, more rockets could be fired towards the enemy. Also, the complex internal mechanics of the Nebelwerfer rockets meant mass production was a slow process versus the relative simplicity of the Soviet design. At the time, German resources were at a premium, and the Wehrmacht were using much of this for the Nebelwerfers. The Waffen-SS had its own network of manufacturing, so took on the project to create a German version. The same simple design as the Soviets, the 8 cm launcher's rockets had fins, and were fast to mass produce for the numbers required. Fueled by cordite, they were made of stamped sheet metal. A 24-rack metal design, again running parallel to each other, allowed for a decent number of rockets. There was also a limited number of 48 racked versions created. The racks were mounted onto half-tracks, with the idea of the weapons being fast and mobile, unlike the towed Nebelwerfers already in existence. Some of the 300 systems produced during the war were even mounted on captured French half-tracks. The weapon system acted much the same as the Soviet version, where the effectiveness was measured in the amount of rockets being fired towards the enemy, as accuracy again was a problem. The German mounts allowed for the weapon to be moved in a 360-degree direction without needing to move the vehicle itself. The relative late entry to the war meant the 300-something systems manufactured would see limited use on the European battlefields. Most of the weapons would feature on the Eastern Front, where a German and Soviet battle of whose rockets are best took place. Unfortunately for the Germans, the sheer amount of Katyushas built, being in the vicinity of 100,000 units, meant that the Germans ultimately fell short on this. But the rocket system was also seen in Western Europe. The image here with Erwin Rommel was taken in Normandy in May 1944 with other high-ranking members of the army. This image is said to be taken on the 30th of May 1944, just a few days before D-Day. It shows shell splashes in the ocean off what would be known as Sword Beach, one of the landing sites for the British. The weapon system is not believed to have been used on D-Day. As with many things on that day, confusion amongst German forces, particularly in that sector of Normandy, meant many troops and weapons weren't brought towards the beaches quick enough. But if used en masse towards the invading Allies, the weapon could certainly have caused many casualties on the beaches. All in all, the 8cm rocket launcher was yet another weapon at Germany's disposal. The lack of numbers and late war introduction meant it would have little effect on the outcome of the war, let alone the outcome of any significant battles. Field artillery was used in much larger numbers, and seemed to have a much bigger impact on approaching Allied forces. So apart from being strange looking, it's another good example of Germany using, albeit a Soviet invention, to try and progress the war in their favour. What are your thoughts on this German weapon system? Do you think mass production of this early in the war would have had a bigger impact on its outcome? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to expand your knowledge and join the growing Premier History community.